We're live. Hi. Greetings all. Just gonna bring in our guest. Yes. Greetings. Awesome. Just a quick one to hear this one quickly. Awesome. Greetings. Awesome. Well, welcome and greetings all. Here we are again for Holistic Lifestyles. I am Elka Netaka, also known as Master Ka. We have had two episodes before. The first one we started with Dr. Sharita. We talked about a plant-based diet. Then we moved on to Mr. Eltom Elmin, who spoke about a breatharian lifestyle. And today we have Netta Aunkh Hapi, who is a Egyptian yoga master. And we are going to speak today on the topic of divinity. I am happy to have you here, brother. I am very thankful. I'm going to open the floor to you to introduce yourself and to bring your message to us. Peace, love, and strength. Thank you for being here.
All right. Hetep, Aunkh Ujasadam, life, health, vitality to you and to your listeners and all who are joining in to be with us on this auspicious occasion of having a reasoning that perhaps I think is one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on the aspect of divinity is because it's kind of missing in our conversation about yoga. And when we talk about yoga, we like to talk about, the health benefits and, the stress relief and the meditative aspect. And all that is kind of the foundation that we use to build the pyramid. Yeah. But you wouldn't confuse the foundation of a pyramid with being a pyramid, would you? Right? Two very different.
Before you go on, brother, because you're a little bit low. I'm sorry, apologies. Yeah, just a little bit low. I don't know if the listeners, I can hear you just a bit. Yeah, awesome.
Is that?
Yes, please.
Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'll try to also project up because my voice can sometimes.
Awesome.
Too much meditation will get you
sure
in a certain state. So yes, my name is Aunkh Aku, and I'm most in the yoga world. I'm known as Netta Aunkh Hapi, and yeah, I have an interesting journey, I guess, in relation to yoga. That's perhaps off the beaten path of why people get into yoga. I got into yoga because I'm interested in liberation. And I'm particularly interested, of course, in the liberation of African people, as I am interested in the liberation of the planet at this time, right? And so I kind of come from a more kind of nationalistic, independent mindset when it comes to my approach to these things and this practice, etc. And I'm looking for what is the pathway to liberation. I'm a student of John Henry Clark, and one of the things that, not in a direct way, indirectly, but one of the things he says, whatever you do, do it for your liberation. So if you're going to do yoga, right? How do you make that liberate you? You're going to be a breatharian, like the beautiful brother that you had on last time. Both of them was very powerful interviews. I got a chance to look over. I'm myself very fascinated with breatharian as a way of life and a potential evolution in culture and human culture. So I'm very interested in his conversations and even connecting with them, because through my own practice, I've felt myself moving in that direction. And so I definitely, and there's a very important connection, I'll say it here, that between breath and liberation in the African-centered context. So in the Kemetic tradition, the word for liberation or freedom is nafu. Yeah. Nafu is also the word that means to breathe. So, and as you can tell, obviously, if you're in a oppressed situation, your breath is going to change dramatically. If somebody puts a gun to your head, your breath is going to shorten up. You're going to get a little bit, depending on who you are, unless you're just a master to breathe the same way, regardless, which would mean that you're liberated, right? So there's a very intimate connection between the breath, freedom, liberation, that I feel is being kind of dismissed in many ways, in many sectors, because when we think of freedom and liberation, we kind of think in political terms, which is useful and powerful and significant, and those kinds of things. And they're connected, as you know, the whole unity, everything is connected. We're all connected. We're connected right now. As a matter of fact, we're so connected that we don't even need the technology to be connected. We just use it because we're in a frame of consciousness that forces us in. I wouldn't say forces us, but force might be a good word given the state of the planet, to use technology as opposed to our own innate technology that we have lying dormant within us. But this idea of Instagram is within somebody's mind. It was inside of them, and they just brought it out. So if that was there, then all things are there. We just have to know how to figure out how to get there. So there's a deep connection between all of these things, and this is, to me, when we begin to explore what Egyptian yoga is about. This is where it departs from what we mean when we say yoga. Let's be very clear that when we use the term like yoga, we're using it for recognition purposes only, so you can have an idea of what we're talking about. But in many ways, today, in today's world, yoga is not yoga in many ways, in many places, depending on who you talk to and what perspective they're teaching it from. If you're going to the more original context of it, you can make a great argument that Western yoga is pretty much almost arguably not yoga, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't want to start off so controversial because, different directions. So my journey, my own personal journey into yoga was that I'm from the islands. I was born in the Bahamas. My mother's Jamaican, so I'm very much, Caribbean in that sense. And I grew up here in the U.S. And as I began to, what interestingly happened to me in the U.S. was that I began to discover something I didn't realize in the islands, right? Which is I was Black, right? And what I mean by that is, if you know the context, when you're surrounded by people that look like you, the emphasis on racial identification is it's just different, right? It's not that there is not dynamics, but it's very, very different, because if somebody stops you or they hound you or whatever, it's usually not just because of the color of your skin per se. There are other factors that weigh into that, and there may be other dynamics that go on. And so it was hard for me initially to think of myself as Black in the world in the way that people in America identify themselves as Black. And it's very important on another level to realize that things like Blackness is contextual. So for instance, I went to a village in Uganda and they called me a white man, right? In their language, right? And, I was looking at them, and in their perspective, they're all midnight Black. So they're looking at me, you're not that Black to me. And I'm like, that's hilarious, because in the world I live in, there's nobody who would remotely suggest. I told a Colombian friend, hey, I went to Uganda, he said I was white, and he looked at me like, you're dark as hell. So these things are very, very relative, and sometimes we can get so latched on to our, identification of it that we miss the bigger message.
Yeah, that's a little poor connection. Hopefully we'll come back in a couple seconds. Let's because this is getting really good. We lost you for a couple seconds.
Well, now I'm found. I once was lost, now I'm found, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm in America, and I'm discovering for the first time, thanks to the good friend of the police department, that I'm Black, right? They stopped me, and I begin to realize, wait a second, I don't think it's just, it's not random that I'm being stopped every other week, right? So I go through this whole metamorphosis and appreciation of, self-discovery, and I get into, some of the issues of activism, concerns around racial identity, yeah? And in that process, I also found myself moving away from traditional religious values that I was, brought in, because of course, having a white Jesus for me, for instance, at that point, just began to be something that, not that, I won't even say there's in a perfect world, it probably wouldn't be a problem, but in a world as confuddled as it is around race, for somebody, I go to places where there are nothing but Black people, and I always find a white Jesus. You know what I mean? But I've never been somewhere where there's white people and I find a Black deity. It's just never, it doesn't happen. I can't go to the UK or Germany or any of those European countries and then somewhere, go to a house and see somebody who's like, yeah, this is Shango, this is Obatala, this is Amun, it probably wouldn't happen at the same level, right? And to me, that's part of the disparity of that's what's happening. And most of this begins at the spirit level first and trickles down into the material and all that. So at some point, I started investigating history, and of course, that led me to Kemet. And Kemet represents, some people say it was the first. It really wasn't. It was really, in many ways, the last of the first. And so if you look at everything about Kemet, it is clear that it's a culture that recognizes that it needed to retain what it was for the world. That says a lot about its own self-awareness, right? It's operating from an eternal consciousness, right? Like when we do things that we do today, we're not thinking about what somebody 10,000 years from now would be thinking about, right? You couldn't build a pyramid to last 10,000 years unless you're thinking about 10,000 years and the impact. It just couldn't. Most of the buildings we build today won't last more than 150 years, which is about consciousness at this point. It's the breath of our consciousness. So I got into Kemet for that reason, and I began to realize that here was a culture that recognized, maybe in a very unique way, the connection between the immaterial and the material. The connection between, here we give lip service to things like body, mind, and spirit. We say that all the time, right? But we don't really function in that reality, right? It's true, but we don't really function that way. We function as if we're only body, right? Primarily, maybe something like that. Certainly not spirit, yeah? So when you look at Kemet, you see something very interesting. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So in the West, we say things like the body is a temple, yeah? The body is a temple. And that's a very nice thing that makes you feel a little bit more spiritual. So, the body is a temple of the divine, God, whatever.
Yeah.
But in Kemet, there's a place called Ipet Esut, the Temple of Krennic, right? Which there's a book called The Temple of Man, where he actually, argues and verifies that the body, that particular temple, is organized to the contours of the human body. So in the Kemetic context, when we say the body is a temple, we're not just talking metaphor. It's a reality, yeah?
We're coming right back to that point. We're missing you, but we're here. We're not going anywhere, guys. Don't go anywhere. This is the world we're living in, internet, and sometimes it doesn't always work that well. So you were out for a couple seconds, but I did not want to miss that point. We ended on, oh my gosh, I forgot.
Yeah, I didn't forget. So I was talking about the Lord's Prayer, and there's a section in there where it says, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven."
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's interesting, if you look at the heavens, right? If you look above, and you look at things like pyramids, you'll notice that the ancients fully accepted that the Nile River was the Milky Way on earth.
Mm.
And the building of the pyramids, to a large degree, reflected that realization of thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, right? Or in the heavens. And so the point I'm making is a lot of what people can articulate, poetically and so on, without actually adding realness to it. In the Kemetic, we see it actually becoming real, right? We see where divine thoughts matter, because divinity, becomes the order of the day. Yeah. And so this led me, this whole appreciation in Kemetic led me to finding, a spiritual tradition in my area. At the time I was in South Florida, under the teacher by the name of Wata Ashby. And if I can, let me just take a second and honor my teacher. That's what I'll show you a book by him that I think is very valuable.
Yes, sir.
To our conversation. Okay, so here goes. This is a book called The Temple of the Soul.
Temple of the Soul. It's backwards, but yeah, we can see it.
What do I need to do?
It's fine. We got to cover Temple of the Soul. Yes, sir.
In this book, he literally goes, essentially, this is the temple in Abdu, where he translates the initiatic code. So essentially he goes, the temple of Abdu of Asar is actually one of the most preserved temples. It's the temple of Seti the First. Yeah. And so it has most of the, maybe 80% of the teachings and the wisdom that was left on the walls. This is one of the places where it's at the highest level. And so I think this is quite a historic book, because it might be the first time in modern history that something like that has really been attempted. The whole thing is translated for us to peruse. And that's just important work. And point I'm making is that, again, we're seeing this idea of divinity made real. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a frequency, a level that we can attain where divinity becomes our way, right? And what it means, to just put a context on that, is that in the Kemetic, the concept of the divine is nature, right? Or some people say neter or untur, depending on how you do. And we know it's relative to the concept of nature, right? Sometimes you'll hear people say that, well, that's just my nature. All right. So what are they talking about? They're saying something about the essence of me. That is what we're talking about when we begin to have the conversation. That's one element of what we're talking about when we talk about divinity. My contemplation over the years has been that to be African, which is the term I use to describe the global family of people that fall in the category of being melanated, et cetera, whatever name, blacks, Afro, whatever. My concept is that to be African, literally in its original or purest context, means to be divine. Means to be at one and in harmony, in tune with nature and the cosmic forces around us. The elements, we know that a major cosmic force in this dimension is Ra, right? The sun, right? Major source of energy. Literally, according to the Kemetic text, we have our being in Ra. We are Ra. So when we say Afra-Ka, right? When I say Afra-Ka, literally you could translate that to be, to be divine in flesh, right? Afu, the physical embodiment of the Ka, the spirit of Ka, of Ra, the creator, right? So that's a whole conversation for another day. But this gives you just a little bit of the insight of the way that I approach yoga, because it's absolutely connected when we begin to discuss the idea of yoga, which is a word that means to unify, right? You would never imagine, to unify ultimately with the divine is the concept, right? To be one with the divine.
Yes.
Realized through our physical reality. Somebody doesn't like me. Somebody doesn't like me.
Right. Don't worry, the message is going to be sent one way or the other. We're here.
Yeah. So I'm saying that so I was saying that this issue of nature and divinity and what it means to be the original state of being that we're talking about relates to that. So when somebody talks about things like breatharianism and so on and so forth, I know they're tapping into more of that type of frequency, more of that essential being, which is very innate to who and what we are, right? Very innate. That's why you'll always see one or two of us in those realms, like breatharian, raw food, whatever. You'll see, but when we're there, we're like leaders. We're like, you know what I mean? Because we're bringing something to the table. Not to take away. The whole world is really us, right? Politically. So this is part of my journey. So I embraced that through the teachings of Ashby. I started on a journey many years ago. I studied with him. And interestingly enough, I really wasn't so moved by physical postures at the time. My interest originally was the philosophy. And as I grew, actually before I grew, as part of getting to the philosophy, he insisted that we'd have to do postures as preparation for the teachings. Yeah. And so that's how I kind of got into the movements and the posture. Very different than most people. I wasn't just there to relax and stretch and all that kind of stuff. I was there really to get the essence of the teachings and what it means. That said, over the years, it kind of evolved to me getting certified under him, starting a class. I started a class on the beaches of South Florida. This is actually our 20th year. That class, my first yoga class, still continues, which I think is more of a tribute to the system itself and the power of the system. I've moved away from the town. I live in a different state, and it keeps going. Keeps going and going and going. And it's kind of spawned a movement where now we've introduced. After about 7 years of doing that, I started a certification process. And over the last 13 years now, we've certified about 400 people globally. That's around, I can't remember all the places, but UK, Jamaica, Bahamas, Bermuda, America, those types of things. Yeah. Yeah. We are there. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your certification. I know you mentioned there's a bit of a fusion going on with Asian concepts and modern concepts. What is, or you tell me.
Okay, so in essence, when we talk about, so part of the reality is that we're obviously not 5,000 years ago. Yeah. We're not in that time, and we're not talking to those people. And so there are elements that, what we have left is what we have left. The system that I practice is probably one of the few systems where just about every posture that we do can be traced to some image or iconography that we see on the walls of Kemet, right? So this is what this system, that's the first aspect of it. But that's not even that significant. What is even more significant about that is that each of those postures actually relate also to the cosmic forces, what they call gods and goddesses. And so the way we view a posture in our tradition would really be to move like a particular cosmic force. So this is very different than just saying, okay, does it strengthen my thighs? What does it do for my knees? Does it my ankles? Does it increase blood circulation? Yes, it does all of that. But that's like the side effect, which is great. We have positive side effects, but that's just like the side effect. The reality is it becomes the doorway into unlocking the unconscious self, right? Which is really the people call the higher self. Because our true nature is not the physical nature. Like I have energy in my body, creative power, right? And that is raw. I have physical components of my body, and that is Geb. I take in air, and that is Shu, right? I take in waters, and that, you understand? So these are actually we are just made up. We are these forces. We are the gods, yeah? And the question at this time is, how do we activate that aspect of ourselves again? How do we do that when everything around us is not only taking us from a, it's taking us from gods to, excuse my French, to niggas, right? It's breaking us down to almost the most impotent level of our existence, right? The word nigger, which I'm choosing to use here, not in a racial context, but in the context of being ignorant, right? And in this context, being ignorant of self is in many ways the fundamental issue of the planet. That's why I say it's about divinity.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know yourself as divine, or do you think of yourself as the ego personality that you've been born into the world as? Are you